that we in the East have already completed plans to secede.
Having concluded that the Igbos were no longer safe anywhere within the borders of eastern Nigeria, the political leaders of eastern Nigeria, led by Odumegwu Ojukwu, decided that the only way to save their people from ethnic persecution was to break away and form their own country. And in 1967, the eastern region, dominated by the Igbo people, declared independence as the Republic of Biafra. The oil reserve buried underneath the Biafran soil became a player when the Nigerian government realized that an independent Biafra would cut down the government oil revenue substantially. With the newly independent state attempting to take away an estimated 70% of Nigeria's oil reserve, the stage have been set for what would ultimately go down as the most violent conflict in West African history. The Biafran War lasted for 3 grueling years, in which an estimated 2 million civilians lost their lives through starvation and disease. Although the Biafran War ended with a win for Nigeria, but its impact on Nigeria's oil industry will be felt for decades to come. One of the interesting aspects of the Biafran struggle was that in breaking away from Nigeria, the Igbo-dominated eastern region also took with them a significant number of the minority ethnic group native to eastern Nigeria. And although many international observers ultimately came to associate Nigeria's oil with Igbo struggle for independence, the true owner of Nigeria's oil were the minority ethnic group of Niger Delta region, who comprised an estimated 40% of the wartime Biafran population. Ironically, this minority group in the Niger Delta would arguably be the worst affected victim of the never-ending struggle for Nigeria's oil. One of such minority groups were the Ogonis, an ethnic group in Niger Delta with population of just 2 million people who lived in a 1,150 square kilometer homeland, which they also refer as Ogoniland. According to oral tradition, the Ogoni people migrated from ancient Ghana down to Atlantic coast, eventually making their way over to eastern Niger Delta region and getting absorbed into the already existing Ibibio, Anang, Igbo, and Ijaw population. The Ogoni people suffered the most devastating consequences of the notorious war alliance between Nigeria's military regime and the oil industry. With Nigeria's government approval, Royal Dutch Shell was granted unrestricted access to explore and extract oil from Ogoni land. The lucrative deal benefited both the military generals and the oil giant, but for Ogoni people, Shell's presence quickly turned into a catastrophic nightmare. The century-old traditions of fishing and farming, which were the backbone of Ogoni culture, were now under severe threat. Oil spills ravaged farmlands and rivers, destroying the very foundation of their way of life. The once thriving industry that sustained Ogoni people for generations were on the brink of collapse. On July 19, 1970, an oil wellhead exploded, unleashing a torrent of fire and hot oil into the Ogoni skies, poisoning the community's primary source of drinking water. As the oil spill ravages the farmland, farmers were forced to abandon their fields, fearful of even the slightest spark could ignite a devastating fire.
If you look at the ground here, you see all this thing is the crude oil. Look at it, see it? It enter into the ground, soak it throughout, look at all over. So when the equipment failure there, the water that is flowing through the creek, so as the tide was coming, carrying the crude oil, that is how he flew up into all the fish pond and kill all the mangrove tree, all the ecosystem, everything that we put there. All of them just died a day. And the workers who were working here too, all of them are redundant. And because they can't go to fish. Now as you see, all the whole place where there were fish, no fish, all the ecosystem, all is dead.
For 3 weeks, the oil spill continued unchecked, leaving a trail of contamination in its wake, polluting the air, land, and most critically, the waterways that sustained Ogoni people. The devastating oil spill of July 1970 was only the beginning of a long series of catastrophic incidents that will plague the region for the next 3 decades. Ken Saro Wiwa, a celebrated Ogoni writer and filmmaker, witnessed these disasters unfolded from his vantage point in Port Harcourt. Saro Wiwa's rise to fame was meteoric thanks to the success of his comedy show, Bisi and Company, which made him arguably the most well-known Ogoni in Nigeria. However, Saro Wiwa's growing frustration with the military government's complicity in the environmental degradation of his homeland led him to take a dramatic turn.
In recovering the money that has been stolen from us, I do not want any blood spilt. Not of an Ogoni man, not of any strangers amongst us. We are going to demand our rights peacefully, non-violently, and we shall win.
He became a key figure in the movement for the survival of Ogoni people, popularly known as MOSOP, an organization dedicated to fighting for the rights and interests of the people. His leadership was instrumental in transforming MOSOP into a powerful platform that demanded environmental restoration, fair revenue distribution, and political autonomy for the Ogoni people. The government, aware of MOSOP's limited bargaining power, ignored their demand and continued business as usual. Saro Wiwa went on to organize a massive protest on January 3, 1993, mobilizing an estimated 1/3 of the Ogoni population. Although the protest drew international attention to the plight of the Ogoni people, it didn't immediately stop Shell's destructive activities. Shell continued to expand its operations, ravaging farmlands and communities, with the Nigerian military's blessing and protection. In response, MOSOP took matters into their own hands, sabotaging Shell's infrastructure in Ogoni land. This bold move threatened a significant chunk of the Nigerian military government's income stream, promoting a swift and decisive reaction. General Ibrahim Babangida announced Decree 29, which mandated the death penalty for everyone promoting materials that could incite violence or promote ethnic nationalism. When General Sani Abacha took over in November 1993, he escalated the government's response, deploying 400 military officers to Ogoni land, with the orders to quash MOSOP demonstrations and open fire on activists whenever possible. The escalating loss of Ogoni youths losing their lives in the fight against Nigeria's military government sparked concern among Ogoni elders. They began criticizing Ken Saro Wiwa's military approach, urging MOSOP to pursue peaceful negotiation with the Abacha regime instead. In May 1994, Ken Saro Wiwa and 8 other activists, later known as the Ogoni 9, were arrested by armed soldiers. The government accused them of inciting the murder of 4 prominent Ogoni chiefs who had publicly criticized Saro Wiwa's activism. Despite their denials, the Ogoni 9 were imprisoned for over a year before facing trial in front of a special tribunal. This tribunal operated under a decree that made its decisions unchallengeable in Nigeria's regular courts. Justice Ibrahim Uta, the tribunal chairman, was seen as closely aligned with General Sani Abacha's military government. Witnesses who testified against Saro Wiwa later admitted that they had been bribed by government agents with promises of money and jobs to implicate him. No physical evidence or reliable testimony directly tied the defendants to the murders. The absence of substantive proof reinforced the argument that the charges were fabricated as a pretext to silence the activists and suppress the growing momentum of the Ogoni struggle. On October 31, 1995, a special tribunal handed down a devastating verdict, sentencing the Ogoni 9 to death by hanging. Despite the global outcry to stop the execution, the Abacha regime carried out the hanging of the Ogoni 9 to the world's horror.
My father's real crime has been to organize the successful and non-violent struggle against the exploitation of Nigeria's Ogoni people and lands by Shell Oil Company and the Nigerian government.